Welcome back, everybody. You are seeing that live shot of Artemis 2. This is set to happen in just a few minutes. In fact, on the other side of this segment that we have, the Artemis 2 has been cleared by NASA for takeoff. The final issue that we were discussing at the top, the battery issue, has been resolved, so everything is clear. So we're going to see Artemis 2 take off with those 4 astronauts and orbit the far side of the moon and come back to Earth in just 10 very, very short days. But in the meantime, on the other side of 10 days, we have the midterms. Yes, they are right around the corner. Now, especially with the midterms right around the corner, obviously soft on crime policies in blue states and purple states continue to pose a threat to Americans. Our next guest is going to talk about that because of one very high-profile case in his state. So joining us now is someone who can talk about all of this and more, is former chairman of the Republican National Committee and current candidate for Senate in North Carolina, friend of the show too, Michael Whatley. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be on with both of you.
Absolutely. All right. I want to start with that news at the top. We are sending 4 humans into space again. It's going to be exciting for the American people. Is this considered, because it's happening during the Trump administration, it's happening with Republicans in control, is this maybe a little bit of a notch in the belt for Republicans heading into midterms?
I think this is a notch in the belt for America. You know, you think about America, this is the greatest nation in the history of the world. And when you look at what we are able to accomplish with science, with math, with technology, with innovation, we just keep getting better and better. And the fact that they've been able to put this mission together within a year, and Jared Isaacman and the NASA team really deserve a lot of credit for it. The president deserves a lot of credit for it, for being able to push this agenda forward and give it a green light and make sure that it goes. But I am so proud of America. And when you think about us and our 250th anniversary, it just continues to show that we are the greatest country in the history of the world.
All right, folks, I want to break in before we get back to Michael. We just got word from NASA. They are putting a hold on the countdown. We don't know the reason yet, but there has been a pause on the countdown at about 8 minutes, I believe it is, that we're looking at. But we will get back to that as soon as we get more news. We'll cut in. Michael, I want to turn to something that happened at CPAC. I missed you there. I felt terrible. My schedule just got mixed up. But a person came up to me. They're from Indiana. They had a lot of family in North Carolina. They said, I'm telling everybody I know in North Carolina to vote in November for Michael Whatley, like Irina's life depends on him, referring to that poor Ukrainian immigrant who got slashed to death on the subway there, a man who had been out of prison who should not have been out of prison. How powerful is that issue that someone in Indiana knows it matters in North Carolina?
It's very powerful. You know, the fact is, Roy Cooper was the most pro-crime president in the history of North Carolina. That when he was governor, he signed an executive order which brought pretrial release and cashless bail to North Carolina, set up a revolving door that put criminals back on the streets immediately after they were arrested, again and again and again. It didn't matter if they were arrested 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50 times, they would be right back on the streets. He also signed a court settlement agreement with the ACLU and the NAACP where he let over 35 hardened criminals out of North Carolina prisoners because he was afraid they were going to get COVID. And he said none of them were violent. He said none of them were violent criminals, and he lied. You know, and the fact is that DeCarlos Brown Jr. was on that list. He was released not just that time, but he was arrested and released 12 more times after that example, 14 times in total. And he should have never been on the streets. He should never have been on that light rail car. And Irina Zarovska should be alive today. In fact, her blood is on Roy Cooper's hands.
Earlier today, some very, very important court proceedings happening at the Supreme Court. And of course, anytime we're talking about law and order, you got to talk about immigration and this issue of birthright citizenship. I feel quite bad, actually, for the government's lawyers and the Solicitor General having the President of the United States right there. I would be quite nervous. But your thoughts on that? I mean, we know what the polling says on this, and it is with the Trump administration.
Yeah, you know, and it's tough to perform like that in front of President Trump. It's an audience of one at that point. Look, you know, immigration is such a phenomenally important issue. You know, you think about with Joe Biden allowing 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants into the United States. He opened up our borders. He put people on planes and flew them into the heartland. And then he gave them billions and billions and billions of dollars in free government assistance. That should have never happened. The fact is that the president on day one sealed that border. And you see now that we have month after month where zero illegal immigrants are being caught at the border and released into the United States. And he is working every day to get the most violent criminals out, the criminal illegal aliens out of the United States. That is something that is tremendously important. You see the fact that fentanyl deaths are way down, that migrant crime is way down, sex trafficking is down. This is all because President Trump sealed that border. The highest, most important function for any government, whether it's the state government, federal government, or local governments, is protecting its citizens, is making sure that we're keeping our kids and our communities safe. And Roy Cooper was an abject failure of that here in North Carolina and does not need to be promoted up to the Senate. I'm very thankful that the president has taken the stances that he has and making sure that he has sealed that border and we're getting these violent criminals out.
Perfect. John, I've just got an update I want to give everybody that they held for a few minutes for a check, and they're now doing the checklist poll to resume the countdown at T-10.
Good. All right, we'll be watching that. And when we get to that 2-minute critical moment, we're going to go right over there. But let's stay on topic with Michael Whatley, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate North Carolina, one of the most closely watched races in America. Michael, tonight, the president will look into the camera. He'll be surrounded by an audience in the White House. He's expected to say we've achieved our objectives in Iran and lay out a timetable for how military operations stop and what comes next in that moment. Iran making some soundings today. Hey, if you don't attack us anymore, we're not going to attack you anymore. They got 47 years of history that casts some doubt on that. But where do you think we are, and what do you want to hear from the president tonight?
I want to hear from the president that we are continuing to make sure that Iran will not have nuclear weapons, that they cannot deliver payloads on their missiles into the Middle East or Europe or the United States, and they're not going to export terrorism anymore. These are the fundamental principles that the president put on the table when he went into Iran. Those are principles that I support, that most of North Carolina supports. And it's very important that we stay on that mission. The fact is, we have had deaths, which are very, very tragic. And my thoughts and my prayers go out to the families of those who've been affected. But North Carolina is the tip of the spear when it comes to protecting our interests and allies around the world. Almost 100,000 men and women in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard are based here in North Carolina. And when it comes to protecting our interests and allies around the world, we're going to be the tip of the spear. We support this mission, and we need to make sure that we see it through.
Yeah.
Michael, we have watched you in your position at North Carolina GOP. We watched you at the head of the RNC, and I know you to be a man who works hard. So I know that you want to go to Capitol Hill to work hard for the American people and the people of North Carolina. But if Democrats take the Senate, then your time will probably all be spent defending impeachment and defending removal from office. How important is it that Republicans at least hold the Senate?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. You think about our agenda right now, which is to create jobs, make sure people are taking home more money, that they get to keep more money, that we're going to keep our kids and our communities safe, that our men and women in uniform are going to get the support they need to carry out their missions here and around the world. We don't need to go back to the agenda that Joe Biden and the Democrats brought in with open borders, inflationary spending, and a weak, woke America. That's not what the people of North Carolina want. I'm excited to get into the majority and be a conservative champion for North Carolina and an ally for President Trump.
Yeah, it's such an extraordinary moment, and keeping that Trump legacy going another 2 years will have enormous momentum for years to come. I want to turn to a subject that I think befuddles a lot of Americans. We have criminal illegal aliens. They're in a prison, in a city or a state. There's a detainer on them. They're allowed to be deported, and that jail, that governor, that mayor, somebody won't allow that person to be turned over to ICE. Now, there's a law in the books called the Alien Harboring Act that says you can't do that. Is it time to have a sheriff or a prosecutor or someone that harbors an illegal alien in a prison, when there's a lawful detainer, apply that law to them and prosecute them for refusing to turn over an alien?
Yeah, you got to have a conversation about that. The fact is that Roy Cooper vetoed legislation here in North Carolina that would have forced the sheriffs to honor ICE detainers and get the violent criminals out of North Carolina. And, that shame on him. And I'm glad that the legislature overrode those vetoes. But the fact is, we still have sheriffs who do not want to honor ICE detainers. And we see it all across the country right now. Tom Homan has been very clear that the safest place for the ICE to pick up an illegal alien criminal is in the jail. You don't need to have outside folks that are going to be weighing in on that. You don't have to put the public at risk. You need to be able to do that. And shame on Roy Cooper for vetoing that legislation. We need the sheriffs all across the country to honor those ICE detainers and get these violent criminals out of America.
Yeah.
Michael, it's not often that I am citing or especially applauding TMZ, but TMZ is tracking members of Congress as they are not doing the work of the people, although some of them are. They're over in Ireland or maybe, here, there, and yonder, and they are actually doing congressional business. But do you think that that applies pressure on Democrats and Republicans, too, possibly, to get back to Capitol Hill to get DHS funded and the Save America Act passed?
They need to get back to Capitol Hill. These are two very, very high priorities. People forget that DHS was founded after 9/11. It was created after the worst attack on American soil in history, where thousands of Americans were killed in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. And it was created to protect the homeland, to protect American citizens. Shame on the Democrats for shutting down DHS for political gamesmanship. This is really callous politics at its worst. Congress needs to be here and have that conversation every single day. When it comes to election integrity, it is absolutely critical for us to pass the Save America Act and make sure that we're going to have voter ID all across the country, and that people have to prove their citizenship when they vote. These are 80-20 issues around the country, and the Democrats steadfastly refuse to move forward on it. Let's go to the floor. Let's have that conversation, and let's force them to defend these radical ideas.
Fantastic. Sir, tell everybody where they can find more about your website.
So my website is michaelwhatley.com. They can follow me on X at @WhatleyNC. And we really hope that people will go, they will sign up, they will contribute, and they will join this movement to make sure that North Carolina has a conservative champion and an ally for President Trump in the Senate.
Well, you are well known and well loved in that state, and we appreciate you being with us tonight, sir. Current candidate for Senate in North Carolina, of course, former chairman of the RNC. Michael, great to see you. All right, everybody, we've got to take a quick break. We are going to check in and see what's happening over at Cape Canaveral, and hopefully on the other side, we will be ready to take that feed and prepare for lunch. We'll be right back.